There is a simple truth that is generally overlooked by the majority of people. It is important to recognize that external assistance is not forthcoming. It is only when an individual elects to allocate their energy in a manner that is congruent with their values and aspirations that a transformation in their life becomes manifest. On you, the manifestation of one's aspirations, objectives, and desired future is contingent upon a single factor: the extent to which one is willing to focus on oneself without distractions, without excuses, and without awaiting permission. It is imperative to cultivate an unyielding resilience, fortified by the conviction that no failure can shatter one's spirit and no rejection can impede one's progress. The prevailing philosophy is that the world rewards those who master themselves, rather than those who blame or those who wait. Those who are successful are those who focus relentlessly on their growth, their vision, and their path. It is imperative to prioritize one's own development until the desired outcome is achieved. It is imperative to recognize the significance of this undertaking, as the responsibility for its completion lies solely with the individual concerned. The present moment could be the opportune juncture at which one ceases to seek external validation and commences the construction of an existence that is truly commensurate with one's inherent worth. It is imperative that the reader remains attentive, as the following assertion may be of paramount significance. Chapter 1. It is imperative to focus on the continuous development of one's personal strength and resilience. In order to achieve this, it is necessary to focus fully on building one's strongest self on a daily basis. It is imperative to recognize that individuals who wish to enhance their personal development must be willing to commit to a consistent and unrelenting approach. It is evident that the progression of life remains unrelenting for all individuals. The passage of time, characterized by the quotidian moments that elapse, is a factor that can exert a detrimental influence on one's personal development. The failure to utilize these moments for self-improvement can result in a cumulative effect that is detrimental to one's long-term well-being. It is imperative to recognize that one's life trajectory can be categorized into two distinct phases, the first being the construction of a desired life, and the second being the drift towards a less than ideal life. The majority of individuals do not achieve success, primarily due to their inability to maintain concentration on their own abilities for a sufficient duration. Individuals often find themselves preoccupied with observing others, engaging in comparison, and succumbing to distraction. The most significant endowment one can bestow upon oneself is that of daily dedication. The commitment to enhancing strength, to attaining wisdom, and to cultivating discipline is paramount. It is not a sporadic occurrence. This is an activity that one must undertake on a daily basis, irrespective of one's personal inclination. The process commences with the decision. It is imperative to recognize that the opportunity to enhance one's academic performance is not guaranteed, and that the present moment is not a guarantee of future success. It is imperative to recognize that self-improvement should be prioritized over all other endeavors. The cultivation of one's most resilient self is not a spontaneous process. It necessitates deliberate effort and strategic intervention. It is important to recognize that the mind is not a self-improving entity. It is imperative to recognize that the attainment of discipline is not a spontaneous occurrence. It is not a matter of chance. The onus is on the individual to take responsibility for their actions. The responsibility for achieving this objective rests with the individual concerned. The process commences on a small scale. The proposed intervention involves dedicating 1 hour to reading activities, as opposed to the more prevalent practice of scrolling. The process is initiated with the undertaking of a single workout, rather than the formation of excuses. The foundation of this approach entails the abstinence from nutritionally deficient foodstuffs and the consumption of sustenance that is conducive to bodily function. The process commences with the act of taking a seat in a tranquil environment, wherein the establishment of authentic life objectives is initiated. The decisions made on a daily basis have a cumulative effect, contributing to the development of one's most resilient self. However, it is imperative to persevere in this endeavor. It is not possible to focus exclusively on personal development in circumstances where one is experiencing ease and simplicity in life. It is imperative to persevere in the face of adversity, whether it be physical exhaustion, despondency, or a perceived lack of external validation. In the absence of observable results, it is at this juncture that the substantial work is undertaken. This is the process of establishing a foundation for a future that is inherently yours and cannot be taken away. The cultivation of strength is most effectively achieved through periods of solitude. The concept of strength being forged through adversity is a prevalent one. The development of strength and power occurs most effectively when there is no external observation. The cultivation of one's most resilient self does not necessarily stem from benevolent intentions. The foundation of this approach is rooted in the principle of action. It is imperative to recognize the necessity of self-efficacy in one's daily routine. The absence of excuse, blame, and procrastination is paramount. It is important to recognize that motivation will not be provided by external sources. It is imperative to adopt a consistent approach in order to ensure the preservation of one's own well-being. The crux of the matter is consistency. The object is unadorned. The daily routine is not an exciting one. However, it is noteworthy that the device is indeed powerful and effective. The pursuit of one's aspirations is a process that is facilitated by the act of self-selection, which occurs on a daily basis. This self-selection contributes to the progression towards one's dreams. It is evident that a daily focus on personal growth is associated with an increase in personal power. While the results may not be immediately apparent, they will ultimately manifest over time. Those who demonstrate the ability to maintain concentration in the face of widespread disengagement are likely to encounter favorable outcomes. The world often rewards those who invest in their own abilities, even when the prospects appear daunting. It is imperative to engage in introspection and present a genuine self-image. The fundamental question is whether one is engaged in self-construction or self-distraction. The fundamental question is whether one is actively propelling oneself towards one's goals or whether one is merely being driven by external forces. This is a challenging question, but the response will provide a significant degree of liberation. In the absence of an increase in strength, a decrease in strength is indicated. In the absence of forward progress, regression becomes inevitable. It is important to recognize that stagnation is not an option in this life. Growth is not a choice. It is imperative to note that this is a mandatory requirement. It is imperative to safeguard one's concentration, as the consequences of failing to do so can be dire. In an age where the world is designed to be a source of constant distraction, the ability to focus has become a superpower. It is imperative to recognize that every notification, every piece of seemingly inconsequential news, and every negative voice attempts to commandeer one's future. It is imperative to maintain a state of vigilance at the entrance of one's consciousness, meticulously determining which stimuli command one's attention. It is imperative to acknowledge the sanctity of one's attention. Attention has been demonstrated to be a fundamental element in the construction of one's life. The cultivation of self-mastery through daily dedication fosters a shift in perspective, engendering a new way of perceiving the world. The pursuit of approval is to be eschewed. The necessity for explicit consent is rendered obsolete. It is important to recognize that the act of explaining one's aspirations to individuals who lack a comprehensive understanding of these aspirations is a futile exercise. The process of self-actualization is characterized by the dissolution of feelings of guilt associated with the pursuit of life goals. The individual is encouraged to embrace their personal identity, both past and present, and to be receptive to the ongoing development of their character. It is imperative to acknowledge that external support is not forthcoming. The onus is on the individual to cultivate strength and resilience. The onus is on the individual to fulfill these obligations. This role is of paramount importance, and the individual selected for the position will be entrusted with a significant responsibility. It is imperative to possess a sufficient degree of self-respect to invest the necessary effort, the act of sacrificing short-term convenience in favor of long-term durability. The preference for growth over the adoption of a conformist approach is a key tenet of this philosophy. The objective is to construct a future that is sufficiently robust to ensure that one can face any challenges or difficulties with confidence and fortitude. Each morning represents a fresh opportunity to cultivate one's personal growth, to fortify oneself, and to demonstrate a commitment to one's future prospects. It is imperative to utilize these days effectively. It is imperative to recognize that these resources are finite and must be managed accordingly. This is not the case. Every day is a building block. The daily commitment to this foundation is integral to its success. The significance of each day cannot be overstated. The focus on the self is conducive to the following outcomes. As one's strength and capabilities increase, the quality of life tends to improve. The improvement of relationships, health, finances, and confidence are all interlinked. However, the onus is on the individual to take responsibility for their own actions. The process invariably commences with the individual. By maintaining a steadfast focus on the present, one may ultimately realize that the attainment of victory is not the true prize. The true prize, however, lay in the personal growth and transformation that occurred during the process. The strongest version of oneself is waiting on the other side of discipline, sacrifice, and consistency. It is evident that the individual in question possesses the necessary qualities and aptitudes for the role. The assertion is made that the subject already possesses all the necessary elements within their psyche. It is not necessary for individuals to possess exceptional talent in order to participate. It is imperative to recognize that external rescue is unnecessary. It is imperative to commit to oneself with an unprecedented level of dedication. It is imperative to initiate this process without further delay. Procrastination will not be an acceptable option. The present moment is the optimal time to focus on the development of one's strongest self. The process is to be repeated on the following day. The day should be accumulated. The aforementioned wins should be accumulated. It is imperative to observe the subsequent transformation in one's life. It is important to observe the development of confidence during this process. It is imperative to observe the manner in which one's strength evolves to become unassailable. This is the most effective strategy. It is important to recognize that success is not achieved through the mere act of hoping. It is not by chance or happenstance that one achieves victory. Achievement is the result of daily dedication to personal development. Achieving victory is contingent upon one's ability to demonstrate commitment to oneself, irrespective of external circumstances. The ability to persevere in the face of adversity is a key factor in achieving success. Achieving success is contingent upon undertaking the tasks that the majority of individuals find uncongenial. It is imperative to concentrate on one's own performance until victory is achieved. It is imperative to recognize the significance of this undertaking, as the responsibility for its completion lies solely with the individual concerned. The second chapter of the study. It is imperative to cultivate the mental capacity to disregard extraneous auditory stimuli. The presence of noise is an unavoidable daily occurrence. A plethora of opinions are being expressed. Distractions have the capacity to expend one's energy. There are voices present which instruct the individual on appropriate courses of action and the desired personal characteristics. It is imperative to exercise caution to avoid the pitfall of living in accordance with the expectations of others. One may become so engrossed in the pursuit of maintaining a sense of identity within a world that no longer recognizes them, to the point of losing oneself in the process. It is imperative to recognize that cultivating the capacity to disregard extraneous influences is not merely advantageous, but essential for optimal cognitive function. It is important to acknowledge the limited capacity of the human mind to sustain concentration over extended periods. It is not feasible to extend this approach universally and indiscriminately. Should this course of action be pursued, the result will be an absence of resources available for personal use. The subject will experience a cessation of nocturnal dreams. The energy of the individual will diminish over time. It is evident that one's confidence is susceptible to deterioration when the mind is persistently subjected to external stimuli, as this can impede the development of a robust mental fortitude. It is imperative to safeguard one's intellectual faculties with the same diligence as one would a cherished asset, given that the mind is indeed the most precious possession one possesses. The world will always have something to say. The existence of divergent opinions is an inevitable aspect of human existence. However, it is important to recognize that opinions are not a sufficient foundation for a fulfilling life. It is important to note that opinions are not a sufficient means by which to cover expenses. It is imperative to recognize that opinions do not determine one's future. Your actions do. The decisions made by the subject, as well as the subject's daily focus, are the factors that must be taken into consideration. The moment an individual begins to accord credence to every expression of opinion, their ability to exercise autonomous decision-making is effectively thwarted. The subject begins to experience self-reflection. It is at this point that the subject begins to experience a sense of uncertainty regarding the chosen trajectory. It is evident that the subject begins to move more slowly. The process of intellectual assimilation into an alternative mode of thought can be likened to the act of reducing one's own intellectual horizons. The cultivation of mental resilience through the suppression of extraneous stimuli can be considered an essential component of personal development. The concept under discussion is that of achieving a state of being so firmly anchored in one's personal vision that external influences are rendered powerless to disrupt one's equilibrium. The concept under discussion is that of achieving a profound self-awareness characterized by a comprehensive and indisputable grasp of one's identity, thereby ensuring that external influences cannot divert one from one's chosen course. This is not a matter of arrogance. The crux of the matter pertains to the notion of clarity. The central tenet of this philosophy is the recognition of the inherent value and significance of one's own life, emphasizing the imperative to safeguard its autonomy from external influences, such as the anxieties and uncertainties projected by others. The initial step is to ascertain the salient issues. It has been demonstrated that when individuals possess a clear sense of direction and purpose, it becomes more straightforward to discern the extraneous elements that may hinder progress. Not every comment needs your attention. Not every comment needs your attention. Not every distraction deserves your energy. You have to decide what is worth your time and what is not. If it does not push you closer to your vision, it is noise. If it does not help you grow stronger, it is noise. If it drains your energy instead of building it, it is noise. You must become ruthless about your focus. You must protect your mind from negativity, from gossip, from jealousy, from comparison, from fear. You cannot allow yourself to get dragged into meaningless battles. You cannot waste your time explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot live your life trying to meet standards that are not even your own. That is how dreams die. That is how great potential is wasted. Train your mind to be quiet when the world gets loud. Learn to hear your own voice above the noise. Learn to trust your own instincts even when nobody else understands. Strength comes from knowing that you do not need validation to move forward. You do not need permission to follow your path. You do not need approval to chase your dreams. The only voice you need to answer to is the one inside you that knows you are made for more. There will always be critics. There will always be doubters. There will always be people who think you are foolish for believing in something bigger. That is not your problem. Their noise is their problem. Your problem is whether you allow it into your mind. Your responsibility is to keep your mind clean, keep it strong, keep it focused. That is your job. That is how you protect your future. When you train your mind to ignore the outside noise, you move faster. You think clearer. You feel lighter. You stop carrying the weight of other people's opinions. You stop apologizing for wanting more out of life. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. The ability to continue living with a power that does not diminish simply because another individual experiences discomfort with it is paramount. The process of mental training does not entail the suppression of external auditory stimuli. The crux of the matter is to be able to discern the true nature of the situation and to make a conscious decision not to expend energy on it. The notion pertains to the acknowledgement of another's perspective or viewpoint, yet the individual in question does not find it to be congruent or aligned with their own. The crux of the argument is that one must remain steadfast in their objectives, regardless of the challenges encountered in the external environment. The objective is to cultivate a mindset capable of withstanding rejection, criticism, failure, and setbacks, while maintaining unwavering conviction and forward momentum. Each day brings a new challenge, On a daily basis, individuals may feel compelled to respond, to defend their position, to provide explanations, or to seek approval. However, by resisting this temptation, one can develop greater resilience. It has been demonstrated that by eschewing the distractions of quotidian life and instead cultivating a state of mental focus, there is a concomitant enhancement of cognitive acumen. The cultivation of a resilient mindset becomes paramount, one that is impervious to external influences and capable of withstanding challenges and adversity. The cultivation of an intellectual framework capable of maintaining clarity and direction amidst the tumultuous vicissitudes of life is paramount. This approach engenders a significant degree of autonomy. It is only when one's need to be understood by the world is no longer required that true freedom can be attained. It is only when the need for constant validation is no longer present that true freedom can be experienced. It is posited that when an individual ceases to permit criticism to define them, they attain a state of freedom. This liberty empowers individuals to pursue their utmost potential, unencumbered by extraneous concerns. The decision must be made today. It is imperative to recognize the paramount importance of one's dreams and to ensure that they are not compromised in the interest of noise. It is imperative to acknowledge that the pursuit of peace holds greater value than the attainment of victory in arguments. It is imperative to recognize that one's energy is of inestimable value and must not be expended on endeavors that do not contribute to one's personal growth and development. The daily practice of this discipline will bring the practitioner one step closer to achieving mastery. On a daily basis, it is imperative to safeguard one's cognitive faculties. The process of attaining a life of pride is one that is characterized by a progression towards a state of self-satisfaction. The ability to focus is a daily choice. Strength is a daily choice. The pursuit of peace is a daily decision. The prerogative to make such a decision rests with the individual. It is imperative to recognize the ability to reject the incessant clamor that permeates the environment. It is imperative to recognize the transformative potential inherent in the ability to affirmatively engage with one's future. The endeavor will inevitably entail challenges. In certain instances, the auditory sensation may be perceived as more pronounced. In the course of a typical day, the individual may encounter a seemingly infinite number of potential diversions. In certain instances, the demand to comply with the prevailing sentiment may be substantial. However, it is imperative to demonstrate fortitude. It is imperative to periodically remind oneself of the initial motivations that led to the commencement of this endeavor. It is imperative to be mindful of the potential consequences and to be prepared to face them. It is imperative to recognize that achieving greatness is not possible by conforming to popular trends. The ability to demonstrate greatness is often attributed to those who possess the fortitude to persevere in solitude when necessary. The concept of greatness is often attributed to those who recognize the power of silence, which, it is often said, can be more expressive than words. The construction of one's life is a responsibility that falls upon the individual. The responsibility for the energy that one permits to surround them lies with the individual. The responsibility for the energy that one permits to surround them lies with the individual. The responsibility for one's mindset and its daily application lies with the individual. Furthermore, it is posited that as one's mental fortitude is strengthened, the clarity of one's path is enhanced. The more clearly defined the path, the greater the speed of progression, and the more proximate the attainment of one's intended life. The external auditory stimuli will persist. This phenomenon is not subject to alteration. But you will be different. The outcome of this process is the cultivation of strength. You will be wiser. The subject will be required to maintain concentration. It is important to note that one should not bend every time the wind blows. It is imperative to recognize that criticism does not invariably result in personal dissolution. It is important to recognize that the pursuit of approval from irrelevant sources is a futile endeavor. It is imperative to condition one's mind to perceive the ambient noise and to persevere in one's journey. The cultivation of mental fortitude is paramount, and it is essential to develop a sense of self-assurance that is unshakable. It is imperative to cultivate one's intellectual faculties to the extent that one is able to discern the correct course of action without the need for external validation. Ultimately, this will be apparent to the individual. The present moment is one's opportunity to engage with the subject. This is the reality of the situation. It is important to avoid the pitfall of expending cognitive resources on the auditory distractions that are so readily available. The focus should be on the construction of a future that is worthy of the individual concerned. The focus should be on the process of self-actualization and the realization of one's true potential. It is imperative to maintain authenticity in the face of external pressures. In the event of remaining steadfast and maintaining concentration, victory is inevitable. It is evident that the world is incapable of impeding a mind that is unwilling to acquiesce. Chapter 3. It is imperative to persevere in the pursuit of one's aspirations, particularly in circumstances where external validation is lacking. It is imperative to recognize that if an individual does not strive for their aspirations, no external force will do so on their behalf. The question of whether or not people care about you is a complex one. It is possible that the object of this affection may reciprocate the sentiment, yet the extent of passion harbored within may not be apparent to them. The vision that is exclusively bestowed upon you remains beyond the grasp of their comprehension. Furthermore, pursuing objectives that extend beyond the boundaries of comfort invariably gives rise to individuals who express skepticism regarding one's capabilities. It is not incumbent upon them to accept the veracity of the claims made. It is yours. In circumstances where one's credibility is questionable, a decision must be made. The choice is therefore between acquiescence and resistance, with the latter being the option of greater significance. The former is characterized by a submission to the limited expectations of others, whereas the latter is characterized by a refusal to acquiesce and a determination to fight harder, in recognition of the fact that the project being built is of greater significance than that which is visible to others. It is evident that numerous exemplary lives have been on the verge of being irreparably damaged as a consequence of the assertion by a person in a close relationship that a particular course of action is unfeasible. It is imperative to acknowledge that belief is not a prerequisite for others. It is a matter of personal responsibility. The pursuit of one's aspirations can be a solitary endeavor. The subject will be seated in a room in solitude, contemplating the possibility of mental instability in relation to their desire for more. There will be mornings where the individual wakes up with doubt pressing against their chest like a weight. There will be days when the desired results are not immediately apparent, and the only factor that can be relied upon is personal conviction. However, further discussion on this topic is beyond the scope of this paper. This is the foundation for achieving significant accomplishments: the ability to believe when there is an absence of evidence. The majority of individuals find contentment in inhabiting diminutive aspirations, as these do not evoke trepidation. It is important to note that the aspirations of a minor do not pose a threat to any individual. However, when one elects to diverge from the conventional paradigm and embark on the creation of an unconventional entity, one must anticipate opposition. It is important to note that those closest to the individual in question are likely to express their disbelief. It is to be expected that the subject's judgment will be called into question. This behavior should not be interpreted as indicative of animosity towards the individual concerned. This suggests that their actions are constrained by their own fears. It is imperative to persevere in the face of such adversity. It is imperative to recognize that the manifestation of one's aspirations is not a mere happenstance, but rather is endowed with a purpose. If the intended recipients were expected to comprehend the content, it would have been observed by them as well. However, this was not the case. You did. The object is hereby placed in your possession. The issue at hand is of a personal nature. It is considered sacred. It is imperative to defend this position with unwavering commitment. The endeavor to achieve one's aspirations must be recognized as being multifaceted in nature, encompassing both internal and external dimensions. This phenomenon can be conceptualized as an inner battle. The voices from without are audible, but the voice within is even more so. It is to be expected that such ruminations as to the possibility of their correctness will be entertained by the mind. Fear can be a compelling factor in the decision-making process, prompting individuals to opt for the path of least resistance. The concept of comfort is known to have a significant impact on an individual's decision to return to a place or situation that they are familiar with. However, it is imperative to persevere in the pursuit of one's goals. On days where challenges arise, it is imperative to exercise emotional fortitude and maintain resilience. It is imperative to exercise leadership and self-motivation in the absence of external supervision. It is evident that individuals who possess a strong sense of commitment to their discipline do not derive motivation from external praise and recognition. The subjects are driven by a sense of purpose. It is evident that they are not anticipating the crowd's approval. The populace is preoccupied with establishing the foundations for their future, undertaking arduous tasks in the present. The primary focus of these individuals is on the vision, rather than on seeking approval. It is evident that the concept of respect is contingent upon the attainment of tangible outcomes, rather than being a prerequisite for action. They demonstrate a readiness to undertake challenges independently in the present and to maintain a strong and confident demeanor in the future. The act of striving for one's aspirations engenders a fortitude that is inherently genuine and cannot be contrived. The process of acquiring resilience is not possible through financial means. The cultivation of a resilient character capable of withstanding pressure is paramount. Every rejection makes you sharper. Every no forces one to dig deeper. Each failure serves as a valuable lesson, equipping individuals with the knowledge to optimize their future efforts. In the context of genuine struggle, the concept of futile battles becomes moot. Each scar serves as a testament to the resilience of those who, in the face of adversity, demonstrated an unwavering refusal to succumb. It is imperative to establish a clear understanding of the fundamental issue at hand. Your dream matters. This is of significance as it has the capacity to influence an individual's development, contributing to their formation into the person they are intended to become. The significance of this endeavor lies in its capacity to instill qualities such as discipline, focus, and unwavering determination. The significance of this process lies in its ability to unveil the optimal qualities of the individual, which, in the absence of such exposure, would remain concealed. The concept of dreams extends beyond the mere pursuit of achievement. The focus of these texts is transformation. These institutions serve as the crucible in which the seeds of greatness are nurtured. It is important to acknowledge that feelings of strength may not always be present. It is important to acknowledge that feelings of courage may not always be present. Periodically, individuals experience a state of self-reflection that engenders a comprehensive evaluation of their convictions, values, and assumptions. This is an inherent aspect of the process. The concept of courage is not synonymous with the absence of fear. The act of demonstrating fortitude entails the ability to persist in the face of daunting challenges or fears. The act of demonstrating fortitude is exemplified by the act of rising once more after falling, even when the alternative is to remain prostrate. The act of demonstrating fortitude entails the recurrent decision to repose faith in the forthcoming day, despite the fact that the preceding day may have culminated in a state of despondency. There will be occasions when the act of resigning from one's position appears to be a rational course of action. It is important to note that there will be occasions when the results obtained will not be as expeditious as was anticipated. There will be periods during which it appears that your efforts are going unnoticed. It is at this point that one must remember that the objective is not to attract attention. It is imperative to recognize that this is a struggle for the future of the nation. One's motivation should not be driven by the pursuit of external validation in the form of applause. The subject is engaged in a struggle to construct the life they have committed themselves to creating. It is imperative to recognize that no individual can undertake this battle on your behalf. They have the capacity to provide encouragement. They are capable of extending felicitations. Ultimately, the responsibility for achieving one's goals rests with the individual. The individual is confronted with their own internal doubts and challenges. The individual must resist the temptation to become complacent and persevere in the face of setbacks, maintaining their commitment to the task at hand. It is important to note that success is not achieved by those who never experience setbacks. Those who prevail in the face of such challenges are those who demonstrate resilience and persevere, despite facing discouragement. It is important to note that success is not necessarily determined by the presence of clarity. Those who demonstrate success in this endeavor are characterized by their ability to proceed with determination, even in circumstances where the path ahead appears to be ambiguous or uncertain. Those who are successful are those who are fortunate, those who demonstrate the ability to persevere and capitalize on fortuitous opportunities when they arise are likely to emerge victorious. The pursuit of one's aspirations necessitates the acknowledgement of elements that one's actions and beliefs may not be universally comprehensible. This entails relinquishing the need to provide justification for one's actions to those who are not inclined to pursue their own aspirations. This entails fostering self-assurance through intrinsic sources as opposed to seeking validation from external sources. The concept signifies the determination to pursue one's desired life trajectory while maintaining a resolute focus on the present, without allowing past experiences to influence future decisions. Regardless of the individual's decision to disengage, the process invariably entails a degree of emotional discomfort. Occasionally, this situation may appear to be unjust. It is important to note that this process can be physically and emotionally draining. However, the pursuit of one's aspirations necessitates a daily struggle, representing a personal battle within oneself. It is evident that each day is marked by a refusal to relinquish the struggle. The character under construction is designed to demonstrate resilience in the face of adversity. It is inevitable that at some point in the future, the subject will find themselves in the position that they have hitherto only imagined. In retrospect, it becomes evident that the trials and tribulations of solitude, the stillness of silent mornings, and the uncertainties of doubt have ultimately contributed to a greater good. Those who have expressed skepticism will continue to do so. The subject continues to engage in discourse, yet remains uncertain and awaits external validation. But you will be different. The possession of substantiating evidence is imperative. It is evident that a conviction that is underpinned by unwavering action has the capacity to effect profound change. It is imperative to refrain from apologizing for the pursuit of one's aspirations. It is important to recognize that individuals should not feel guilty for choosing a path that others are too afraid to walk. It is imperative to maintain unwavering ambition in the pursuit of ensuring the comfort of others. It is imperative to advocate for this cause with unwavering commitment, as if the outcome were contingent upon one's very survival. It is evident that this is indeed the case. One's future life, self, and peace are all impacted by this phenomenon. The outcome of these endeavors is contingent upon the extent to which one is willing to engage in the present struggle. There will come a time when the need to provide a justification for one's beliefs will no longer be necessary. There will come a time when the evidence will prove more persuasive than any words one might choose to use. There will come a time when the struggle you are currently engaged in will serve as a source of motivation for others. However, in order to achieve this objective, it is imperative to persevere in one's efforts. It is imperative to maintain unwavering faith. It is imperative to maintain forward momentum. It is imperative to refrain from awaiting external validation. It is imperative to adopt a stance of personal conviction. Be your own fighter. Be your own proof. It is imperative to bear the following in mind when feelings of fatigue arise. The notion that the dream is not bestowed upon the strongest or the fastest is a fundamental principle that underpins the study of dreams. This is attributed to the individual who refuses to relinquish their pursuit of this endeavor. It is imperative to strive for one's aspirations. It is imperative to engage in combat when confronted with adversity. It is imperative to engage in combat when one is in a state of solitude. It is imperative to engage in combat when one perceives that their actions are going unnoticed. It is imperative to engage in combat for one's own sake, as it is an act that is owed to oneself. Fight because you were made for more. It is imperative to recognize that one's actions and contributions will be held up to scrutiny, and that the world will one day acknowledge and appreciate the efforts made. However, the validation of others will not be necessary, as the desired outcome will already have been achieved through one's own efforts. Chapter 4, it is imperative to engage in self-promotion on a daily basis. In order to manifest authentic change in one's life, it is imperative to demonstrate commitment and consistency in one's personal endeavors on a daily basis. This should not be a matter of occasional indulgence or one that is dependent upon convenience or heightened emotional states on a daily basis. The pursuit of a life that is characterized by fleeting moments of motivation is not conducive to achieving long-term goals. The foundation of this commitment is the daily dedication of the individual. The act of building occurs when one elects to undertake a task regardless of external validation or acknowledgement. The prevailing tendency for individuals to fail to actualize their potential in the domain of dream manifestation is not attributable to an absence of innate capability. Rather, this failure is predominantly attributable to inconsistency in the pursuit of this potential. Their presence is noted on Monday, yet by Friday their absence is already evident. The subjects under scrutiny work strenuously for a period of 7 days, subsequently experiencing a cessation in activity for a duration of 30 days. They commit when it is easy and run when it gets tough. It is evident that such an approach is incompatible with the attainment of success. It is imperative to cultivate the ability to demonstrate consistent presence, irrespective of individual sentiments. Trust in oneself is paramount. The importance of adhering to one's stated intentions is paramount. The pursuit of a goal must be pursued with dedication and consistency on a daily basis, without deferring action in anticipation of external reminders. It is an irrefutable fact that those who demonstrate consistency in their endeavors are rewarded by the world. Life opens doors for people who stay in the fight. It is widely accepted that success is frequently associated with individuals who demonstrate resilience in the face of adversity, persisting in their endeavors even during periods of stagnation, monotony, or personal distress. The act of attending to oneself on a daily basis has been demonstrated to engender a sense of self-respect that is impervious to external influences. The motivation to persist is not contingent upon external validation. The expectation of confirmation of efficacy is thus negated. The process of self-sufficiency is characterized by the cessation of reliance on external validation as a means of determining personal adequacy. The concept of self-sufficiency is predicated on the notion of self-empowerment, which is evidenced by the actions of the individual in question. The act of showing up is not contingent upon the attainment of perfection. The objective is not to execute all tasks in an impeccable manner. The importance of self-efficacy in such situations cannot be overstated. The act of persevering in the face of incremental progress is of paramount importance. The notion of progress, as opposed to the stagnation of inactivity, is paramount in this context. It is posited that the incremental advancement, however minuscule, is preferable to the state of inertia, wherein the advent of motivation is eagerly anticipated as a panacea. It is important to acknowledge that there will be days when the motivation to engage in any activity is absent. In the instance of days where the bed appears to be of greater mass than is typical, this phenomenon may be observed. In such periods, it is evident that the prevalence of excuses is amplified. There are occasions when the perception of the finish line is so distant that one is prompted to question the value of the exertion. It is these days that carry the greatest significance. It is during such periods that the distinction between those who merely dream and those who take action becomes clearly delineated. In such periods, individuals are compelled to demonstrate the primacy of their future aspirations over their emotional inclinations. It is imperative to cultivate a sense of reliability, not only in the eyes of others, but more importantly, in one's own. It is imperative that the individual concerned is able to demonstrate reliability in terms of attendance and the execution of tasks. It is imperative to have self-trust, since an absence of this quality can lead to a collapse of all other aspects. It is evident that the subject in question is likely to be unable to uphold the commitments they have made. The establishment of objectives that invariably prove unattainable is a common occurrence. This may result in a loss of self-confidence and self-assurance. The establishment of trust is predicated on the consistent demonstration of authenticity in one's actions and interactions. The act of adhering to a modest obligation on a consistent basis serves to fortify one's underlying structure. It is an irrefutable fact that, over time, the aforementioned foundation will become unshakable. With the passage of time, the necessity of willpower to ensure attendance diminishes, as the act of showing up becomes intrinsic to one's identity. This process ultimately constitutes one's identity. This process becomes instinctual over time. The attainment of results is contingent upon consistency. It is imperative to recognize that the attainment of growth is contingent upon the adherence to a stringent code of discipline. It is important to recognize that the absence of effort cannot be expected to yield change. The phenomenon of dreams necessitates more than mere desire. This necessitates a concerted response. This phenomenon is not a sporadic occurrence, but rather a daily event. This phenomenon manifests in myriad ways, both perceptible and imperceptible, and at both macro and micro levels. All factors must be given due consideration. The significance of each element is paramount. It is evident that those who achieve success are not invariably those who have traveled the most straightforward path. It is evident that these individuals do not possess the ability to manipulate outcomes through strategic means. It was these individuals who exhibited a remarkable degree of persistence, continuing to participate even when others had become weary. It is precisely these individuals who have sustained their commitment to their discipline, despite the absence of external validation. It is noteworthy that they demonstrated unwavering commitment to the process, maintaining this commitment even during periods of protracted waiting for results. Each day provides a fresh opportunity to demonstrate resilience. On a daily basis, an individual is presented with a fresh opportunity to achieve self-satisfaction. It is important to recognize that each day brings with it the opportunity to shape the narrative of one's life through one's actions. The present day may be considered as another wasted page. The question must be posed: will this be a page that can be looked back on with pride? It is imperative to recognize the value of personal responsibility in ensuring one's own well-being. It is incumbent upon the individual to ensure that they are able to provide for the future generation with which they have been dreaming. It is incumbent upon the individual to honor the vision that persistently draws them in. It is incumbent upon the individual to recognize the value of this opportunity to the younger self, who may have previously held the conviction that such an outcome was feasible. It is incumbent upon the individual to recognize the necessity of this commitment to the personal development process. It is not necessary for these gestures to be elaborate or ostentatious. It is not necessary for the volume to be elevated. The approach does not necessitate exaggeration. In some cases, the act of physically attending can be misinterpreted as a form of quiet contemplation in pursuit of personal objectives, despite the potential for alternative utilization of that time. In some cases, it may appear that the optimal choice is to be made today rather than yesterday. Occasionally, it appears that one is capable of performing optimally even when experiencing a significant reduction in energy levels. Small steps are still steps. It is important to recognize that achieving minor objectives is still a victory. It is important to acknowledge that progress, regardless of its pace, is a continuous and incremental process. The only way to lose is to cease to participate. The only way to fail is to reach the conclusion that the effort is no longer worthwhile. In certain instances, the subject may experience heightened levels of energy. It is important to note that there will be days when the subject will experience a state of exhaustion. On occasion, individuals may experience a sense of inspiration. Periodically, a state of numbness may be experienced. The issue is of negligible importance. The crux of the matter is to demonstrate persistence, to ensure the consistent placement of one stone on top of another, and to methodically accumulate the days, as it is the daily actions that shape the future. It is evident that individuals are more inclined to attend events that are engaging and enjoyable. The phenomenon of appearing at events when positive outcomes are evident has been well documented. The phenomenon of individuals experiencing an elevated level of motivation to perform when they are being applauded by an audience has been well documented. However, it is often the case that the most successful individuals are those who operate in a discrete manner. It is in circumstances where the outcomes are not immediately apparent that the true winners are identified. It is at such times that those who truly triumph are revealed. The ability to demonstrate consistent presence and dedication in one's daily endeavors is a fundamental component in the construction of any aspiration. It is possible to effect a transformation in one's state of health. The ability to accumulate wealth is a possibility. It is possible to construct an existence that inspires a sense of pride in its inhabitant. The crux of the matter is whether or not one is willing to demonstrate self-efficacy. It is imperative to recognize that no alternative entity can execute this particular task on your behalf. It is evident that no other individual can record the same number of hours. It is evident that no other individual possesses the capacity to withstand the arduous demands of this endeavor. It has to be you. It is imperative to be willing to introspect and acknowledge that one has not relinquished one's efforts on this day. In this particular instance, I was able to exercise restraint and avoid succumbing to my emotions. I prioritize my future prospects over personal comfort. There is no undisclosed formula for success. It is important to note that there is no magic shortcut. The prevailing reality is one of quotidian routine, encompassing the execution of tasks deemed requisite, notwithstanding the inclination to opt for the most straightforward course of action. It is evident that each instance of attendance contributes to the development of strength, resilience, and belief. It is to be expected that, at a certain point in time, the individual will look around and realize that the objects of their desires have been attained. Secondly, it is important to note that this phenomenon will not be attributable to chance. The act of bestowing an item upon an individual does not, in and of itself, constitute the act of giving. The rationale behind this phenomenon is that the subject in question demonstrated a consistent commitment to their personal development, despite the fact that their peers were not able to observe the same level of progress. The manner in which individuals choose to act in any given situation has the capacity to shape their future outcomes. The objective is to ensure that the result is a work of art. The objective is to ensure that the result is a product or service that instills a sense of pride in the individual. It is imperative to ensure that one's lifestyle is reflective of the fortitude required to persist, even when the option to relinquish one's efforts would have been more palatable. Show up for yourself. This phenomenon is not occasional or intermittent, but rather it is a daily occurrence. Chapter 5, it is imperative to eliminate all potential distractions that might compromise one's concentration. In the contemporary world, a plethora of opportunities is available. The piece is lacking in focus. The initiation of a new endeavor is a relatively straightforward process. The challenge lies in sustaining engagement over an extended period, ultimately leading to the completion of the task. On a daily basis, a multitude of factors compete for the individual's cognitive resources, demanding attention, time, and energy. It is imperative to recognize the significance of addressing distractions with the utmost seriousness, as their insidious influence can gradually erode one's future prospects if left unaddressed. Focus is not something you find. The ability to focus is a skill that can be developed. The construction of the aforementioned concept is founded upon the premise of its protection. The construction of the structure is achieved through the elimination of elements that could compromise its integrity. You have dreams to achieve. It is imperative to recognize that individuals have objectives they wish to achieve. It is imperative to recognize that individuals possess a life that must be constructed. It is imperative to allocate time and resources towards activities that contribute to long-term goals, as procrastination can lead to significant losses in terms of time and opportunity costs. It is imperative to avoid allowing one's focus to be diverted by superfluous notifications. All perspectives encountered and all inclinations to seek solace in endeavors that are less arduous than confronting the genuine tasks at hand. It is important to recognize that every distraction has a cost. This cost is a prospective expense. In the absence of self-control over one's attention, it can be argued that another party exerts a degree of influence. In the absence of a conscious direction of one's energy, the world will determine its allocation. Furthermore, the global community does not pay any heed to one's aspirations. The program does not take into account the user's objectives. It is characterized by its ability to take time and provide nothing in return. It is imperative to employ more sophisticated reasoning. It is imperative to discern distractions for what they truly are. Thieves. The consequences of this phenomenon include the theft of time, energy, focus, and future opportunities. The elimination of distractions is not merely an endeavor to enhance productivity. It is an integral component of achieving optimal efficiency and performance. The objective is to achieve a heightened state of vitality. The concept under discussion can be defined as the act of reclaiming autonomy in one's own life. The act of eschewing the tendency to become ensnared by the incessant demands of interruptions, the pervasive practice of gossip, the frivolous pursuit of mindless scrolling, and the pursuit of entertainment that offers no tangible contribution to one's personal growth and development. The notion of declaring, "My life is of sufficient importance to be regarded as a waste," is pivotal in this regard. The initial step in the process of eliminating distractions is to engage in a period of introspection and self-evaluation. What is the daily activity that is causing a lack of concentration? In which areas of your life are you losing hours without even realizing it? Which habitual practices are devoid of reciprocity, yet nevertheless exact a toll on the individual? It is not possible to rectify that which one does not confront. It is imperative to confront the reality of one's time allocation. The subsequent stage is to establish an environment that is conducive to the realization of one's objectives. The environment should be conducive to concentration, not its opposite. Clean up your space. The removal of superfluous clutter is an essential step in this process. It is imperative to eliminate extraneous auditory stimuli. It is imperative to exercise restraint in the face of these temptations. The objective is to facilitate the execution of appropriate actions and to impede the commission of undesirable acts. It is an unrealistic expectation to maintain concentration in an environment designed to facilitate distraction. It is imperative to safeguard one's psychological well-being. It is important to recognize that not all conversations are of equal value or importance. It is important to note that not all arguments are equally valuable or deserving of engagement. It is not incumbent upon an individual to respond to every negative opinion expressed. It is imperative to safeguard one's peace of mind, as it significantly impacts one's future prospects. Whenever an individual becomes engrossed in a situation or activity that does not align with their long-term goals and values, they experience a loss of forward progress. It is insufficient to merely aspire to focus. Rather, the creation of a system that facilitates this is imperative. The establishment of clearly defined work hours is paramount. It is recommended that notifications be disabled. It is imperative to limit exposure to distractions that divert cognitive resources from more pressing concerns. It is imperative to make a genuine commitment to oneself. In the event that a full day's engagement is not feasible, a duration of 1 hour may be considered as a preliminary undertaking. The initial phase of the program should consist of one focused session per day, with subsequent phases incorporating additional sessions as the program progresses. The concept of momentum is developed through a series of decisions made sequentially. The elimination of distractions can be conceptualized as a gift bestowed upon one's future self. Resisting every temptation is an investment in one's future strength. The act of electing to prioritize focus over ease has been demonstrated to have a number of beneficial effects on the mind and its capacity for discipline. Furthermore, it has been shown to bring the individual one step closer to the life they were born to live. The significance of each element is paramount. The sum total of these factors is therefore significant. It is important to note that distractions do not solely originate from external sources. The subjects are also located indoors. Self-doubt has been identified as a significant source of distraction. The tendency to overthink is a source of distraction. Concerns regarding the perceptions of others serve as a source of diversion. The trepidation surrounding the prospect of failure has been identified as a significant source of distraction. It is imperative to learn to quiet the inner noise just as much as the outer. It is imperative to develop the capacity to redirect one's focus in the face of fear and doubt. It is imperative to be able to recognize when a particular behavior or thought is not conducive to one's own well-being. It is imperative that the focus of the individual is redirected to the task at hand. The construction of a life that is deemed to be of value to you necessitates more than mere talent. It requires endurance. The ability to maintain commitment to a particular endeavor, even in the face of diminishing enthusiasm, is paramount. The ability to persevere in the face of immediate gratification is a key component of the skill set required for success in this field. The capacity for such endurance is predicated on the ability to eliminate distractions with absolute rigor. It is imperative to acknowledge that certain sacrifices must be made. It is imperative to decline invitations to events or activities that one does not wish to attend in order to maintain a balanced and well-rounded lifestyle. Consequently, individuals may encounter a loss of involvement in certain social activities, such as conversations, social gatherings, and prevailing trends. The experience of missing out is an inevitable aspect of the process. Ultimately, however, it will become apparent that no significant elements were overlooked. It becomes evident that the pursuit of one's own potential is the only worthwhile endeavor. The reality of the situation is that the true conflict does not occur in the external environment. The object of our search is located within this section. The phenomenon under discussion is located within the mind of the individual. The question, therefore, arises as to whether the ability to maintain focus on one's objective, despite external influences seeking to divert attention, can be cultivated or developed. The question that needs to be addressed is whether it is possible to maintain authenticity in one's work when there is such an easy and immediate access to entertainment. The ability to persevere in the face of distractions that masquerade as opportunities is a critical skill for success in this field. This is the test. This distinction is pivotal in differentiating between those who merely aspire and those who successfully achieve their objectives. The selection of focus as a preference is indicative of a prioritization of one's future over one's emotional state. Each refusal to be distracted is tantamount to an affirmation of one's deepest aspirations. The act of closing a door to a meaningless activity invariably results in the opening of another door to a more significant and impactful undertaking. The objective is not to achieve perfection. The concept under discussion is that of intentionality. The objective is to be clear about the desired outcome and to protect the path that leads to it. It is important to recognize that there is no external entity that will be able to organize one's time on one's behalf. It is important to recognize that no individual will be able to clear your schedule. It is important to note that external factors are unlikely to compel individuals to reduce the volume of their music. The onus is on the individual to ensure that they are adequately prepared. This phenomenon can be attributed to the inherent power of the individual. This represents an opportunity for individuals to assume a position of agency with regard to their cognitive processes. The objective is to facilitate the acquisition of greater agency over one's focus and future prospects. The decision to eliminate all potential distractions that might compromise one's concentration marks the onset of a transformation. The rate of progress is accelerated. A sense of increased confidence is experienced. It has been demonstrated that the subject will experience an increase in energy levels upon waking. The transition to this new phase in life is characterized by a sense of purpose and direction as the individual realizes that expending energy on trivial conflicts is counterproductive. The attainment of high achievement is not contingent upon any particular secret. The focus is applied with a high degree of clarity on a daily basis. It is only through consistent action, driven by disciplined energy, that progress can be achieved. The only constant is the unrelenting removal of anything that attempts to divert the subject from their chosen path. This phenomenon is a fundamental aspect of the construction of dreams. This is an illustration of how lives can be transformed. It is not necessary for an individual to surpass their peers in terms of intelligence. It is not necessary to be fortunate in order to achieve this. It is not a prerequisite to be naturally talented. However, it is essential to be able to focus. It is imperative that greater discipline is exercised. It is imperative to cultivate a heightened sense of determination in order to safeguard one's time, energy, and mental well-being. The present season represents a crucial opportunity for the team to refine and enhance their performance. This is the moment to be discerning about what one permits into one's life. This juncture demands the determination that no extraneous factors will divert one's focus from the future being forged. The removal of this element is imperative. Should this prove to be the case, it would be advisable to eliminate it. Should the latter prove to be the case, then it would be advisable to consider reducing the amount of time spent on the activity. Should the activity in question prove to be a source of exhaustion, it would be advisable to discontinue participation. Should the latter prove ineffective, the most prudent course of action would be to excise it. It is imperative to recognize the significance of one's aspirations and to dedicate one's utmost efforts to their realization. It is imperative to allocate sufficient attention to one's future endeavors. The subject is to remain still and awake. It is imperative to maintain commitment to this endeavor. It is imperative to maintain concentration as the desired life is situated beyond the distractions that are prepared to be eradicated in the present. Chapter 6. It is imperative to take ownership of one's life without attributing blame to external factors. There is a juncture in life at which a grave decision must be made regarding one's future. It is imperative to determine whether the tendency to attribute blame will be continued or whether full responsibility for the desired changes will be accepted, thereby ensuring complete ownership of one's life and the absence of external blame for any occurrences. The subject continues to experience a state of stagnation. The subject remains powerless. The subject is to remain in the rear. The day an individual possesses all the assets and resources is the day they begin to exercise genuine authority over their future. The attribution of blame is a simple matter. This initial sensation is transient and fleeting, providing a momentary sense of physical well-being. The aforementioned phenomenon engenders the belief that failures are not attributable to the individual. This phenomenon provides an opportunity for individuals to remain in their current situation. However, the associated financial costs are prohibitive. The act of allocating blame to external entities effectively ceded authority over one's life to them. The act of pointing fingers serves to indicate an unwillingness to take responsibility for the issue at hand. The assumption that one has the capacity to effect change is predicated on the premise that the responsibility for the state of affairs in question can be attributed to another party. The concept of owning one's life entails the assumption of complete responsibility for the decisions made, the habits cultivated, the mindset adopted, and the outcomes achieved. The objective is not to engage in self-recrimination. The concept under discussion is the notion of recognizing one's capacity to make novel choices with immediate effect. You are not stuck. You are not helpless. The notion that an individual is irredeemably flawed and beyond redemption is a fallacious one. The present situation can be likened to a crossroads, at which point the path ahead will determine the subject's ownership. It is imperative to recognize that blame will impede progress. Once the act of blaming is discontinued, the process of construction can commence. It is only when one ceases to create justifications for their actions that they are able to devise effective solutions. It is imperative to shift one's self-perception from that of a victim to that of a leader. This shift has the potential to bring about significant changes. Consequently, the obstacles previously encountered are no longer insurmountable. Errors are no longer to be considered as definitive conclusions. These are lessons. They are tools. These elements serve as foundational components for the future that you are determined to shape. The initial starting point, irrespective of its perceived fairness, is ultimately inconsequential. The challenges faced are irrelevant. The actions of other parties are not relevant. The salient issue at present is a decision to be made regarding the future of the subject. It is not possible to rewrite the past. However, it is possible to shape the future. It is possible to transform every disadvantage into a strength. It is possible to utilize each failure as a form of training. It is possible to utilize every setback as a source of motivation, rather than allowing it to become a justification for failure. The most resilient individuals are those who have ceased to attribute blame. It has been demonstrated that they do not engage in futile discourse regarding the arduous nature of the task. It is evident that they do not engage in passive aspirations for a different state of affairs. They demonstrate resilience by rising each day and utilizing the resources at their disposal. They build. The subjects continue to advance. They focus on solutions. They demonstrate a strong sense of personal responsibility and autonomy in their approach to the program. The act of ownership entails confronting uncomfortable realities. It signifies the acknowledgement of indolence. This signifies the acknowledgement of the role that fear plays in decision-making. The process of self-reflection enables the identification of personal deficiencies. It is not intended to engender feelings of self-criticism. Rather, the objective is to facilitate self-improvement. Authentic change is predicated on veracity. This phenomenon is not one that is generally disclosed to others. Rather, it is a personal revelation that is confided to oneself in private. The act of assuming responsibility for one's own life signifies the reacquisition of personal agency. The process of self-empowerment entails the cessation of passive reliance on external entities for salvation. The pursuit of ideal circumstances is relinquished. It is imperative to cease the futile expenditure of time in the anticipation that another party will assume responsibility for the task. The subject then assumes the driver's seat. The process of steering one's life in a desired direction is initiated. It is at this juncture that a shift in perspective becomes evident. Nobody owes you your dream. It is important to recognize that success is not handed to individuals. It is achieved through hard work and strategic planning. It is incumbent upon each individual to demonstrate self-efficacy on a daily basis. It is imperative to persevere through challenging days. The onus is on the individual to maintain concentration in the face of adversity. It is incumbent upon the individual to persist in their endeavors, even in the absence of external validation. The onus is on the individual to take responsibility for their life from cradle to grave. Whilst the incident may not have been caused by the individual concerned, the onus is on them to recover and resume their position. While the inequities of life may not be of one's own making, the onus falls upon the individual to transcend them. While the infliction of harm may not be the fault of the victim, the onus is on the individual to recuperate and proceed with their life. The concept of responsibility does not inherently entail a determination of culpability. The crux of the matter pertains to the issue of ownership. The decision is made irrespective of external circumstances. Christina asserts that the individual in question retains the capacity to determine subsequent events. It is imperative to disabuse oneself of the notion that external forces are impediments of personal growth and advancement. It is imperative to recognize that an individual cannot exercise such influence over another person unless the latter has voluntarily conceded it. The circumstances under discussion are indeed real. The challenges faced by the group are genuine. However, it is equally important to acknowledge the significance of one's ability to rise. It is imperative to consider the capacity to adapt as a key factor in this matter. The ability to create a new path forward when the old one is blocked is therefore essential. Those who achieve significant accomplishments are not invariably those who have experienced the most straightforward paths. These individuals are characterized by an unwavering determination to exercise autonomy in shaping their future, rejecting the notion of external forces determining their destiny. These individuals have demonstrated a remarkable capacity to acknowledge their strengths, weaknesses, and decisions, while persevering in their endeavors. It was recognized that the act of blaming did not contribute to the creation of anything of value. The identification of reasons as to why an individual is not where they desire to be is a simple process. It is simple to attribute blame to others, to external factors such as the economy, or to one's past circumstances. However, it should be recognized that allocating time to blame constitutes a valuable opportunity that could have been utilized for constructive action. It is important to recognize that every moment spent formulating excuses is a moment that could have been utilized to make progress. The cost is prohibitive. The trade-off is too onerous. It is imperative to avoid the pitfall of expending precious time and energy on self-blame. The notion of ownership is intrinsically linked to the concept of freedom. The concept of self-ownership, as elucidated by the author, posits that the individual has complete agency over their own life, and that every step forward is within their purview. It is evident that every improvement is within reach. It is important to note that each stage of growth can be pursued. It is important to recognize that the process of waiting for things to become easier is a futile one. It is at this point that the prospect of improvement by another party is relinquished. The process of self-discovery and self-empowerment enables individuals to take ownership of their own destinies. The objective is not to achieve perfection. The crux of the matter pertains to a sense of responsibility. The notion of showing up for oneself, even in moments of personal distress, serves as a fundamental principle in this paradigm. The notion encapsulated here is that of perseverance in the face of adversity, particularly in the context of personal history. The notion under discussion is that of a positive outlook, in which one believes that their optimal days remain to come rather than having already been experienced. It is imperative for individuals to take ownership of their personal development, as this approach is fundamental to achieving self-actualization. It is imperative to recognize the obligation to persist in one's endeavors, especially when faced with challenges, in order to ensure that future self-expectations are met. It is incumbent upon the individual to honor the aspirations instilled within them, as these dreams are imbued with a purpose and significance. It is incumbent upon individuals who continue to harbor convictions in the existence of a higher power to act in accordance with these beliefs. It is imperative to take ownership of one's decisions. It is imperative to take ownership of one's habits. It is imperative to take ownership of one's mindset. It is imperative to take ownership of the outcomes of these actions, whether positive or negative, straightforward or challenging, or whether it was anticipated or unanticipated. Own it all. The assertion is that the moment an individual possesses all things is the moment they gain the power to alter all things. The prevailing notion that life is defined by external events is a fallacy. The crux of the matter pertains to the actions one elects to take in response to these circumstances. The crux of the matter pertains to the manner in which one elects to respond. The crux of the matter pertains to the standards one sets for oneself. The effort expended, even in private, is of significance. The construction of a robust foundation for such a structure necessitates the establishment of complete responsibility. The pursuit of this objective demands not merely expediency, but also a refusal to accept excuses or to apportion blame. Instead, it necessitates a sense of ownership, a profound courage, and an unwavering commitment to relentless forward movement. Maintaining a sense of personal responsibility and autonomy in the face of life's challenges is conducive to the development of a resilient character. The construction of a robust future, impervious to external influences, is attainable. This is the reality of the situation. It is imperative to take ownership of one's circumstances, to embody a sense of agency, and to construct a future that is not predicated on the culpability of external factors. The capacity to shape one's destiny has always resided within the individual, and it is incumbent upon each individual to recognize and actualize this potential. Chapter 7. In such cases, it is recommended that the individual concerned should be encouraged to persevere in their efforts, even in the face of the temptation to abandon the task. There will invariably be a juncture at which the prospect of cessation appears more straightforward than the continuation of the status quo. The magnitude of one's aspirations is inconsequential. The initial strength of the subject is not a determining factor. There will be occasions when the burden of the journey appears to exceed one's capacity. It is the defining moments of one's life that leave an indelible mark on an individual's character. It is during such periods that individuals are presented with the opportunity to determine their future, as the prevailing sentiment is one of resignation. However, not all individuals opt to exert greater effort in such circumstances. The primary reason why the majority of individuals never achieve their full potential is not due to a lack of talent. This phenomenon can be attributed to the propensity of these organisms to withdraw in response to elevated pressures. As the discomfort intensifies, they endeavor to identify a means of escape. In situations where it appears that no available strategies are yielding the desired results, the belief that further efforts are futile becomes deeply entrenched. However, it is important to note that success is not achieved by those who opt for the path of least resistance. It is a characteristic of those who persistently continue to move, despite the desire to desist. It is imperative to exercise discernment and not permit transient sentiments to dictate one's long-term trajectory. Emotions are fleeting and evanescent. On certain mornings, the subject may experience an increase in energy levels. In certain instances, a state of fatigue may be experienced prior to the commencement of the designated activity. However, it is important to recognize that an individual's future success is not solely determined by their current emotional state. The concept is predicated on the manner in which one conducts oneself in circumstances that are characterized by difficulty in action. The construction of this concept is founded on the decisions made when one's internal drive and motivation fluctuate, rather than remaining consistent and strong. The notion of exerting greater effort does not imply the assumption that all tasks are inherently straightforward. The concept entails the acknowledgement that discomfort is an inherent component of the process, and the subsequent decision to persevere despite this discomfort. This is indicative of the fact that the most significant triumphs are often achieved in the aftermath of considerable adversity. This entails the comprehension that the inclination to relinquish one's efforts should not be interpreted as a signal to cease. This phenomenon can be interpreted as a signal to delve deeper, thereby uncovering a hitherto unknown level of strength. When confronted with adversity, the majority of individuals tend to reduce their pace. The majority of individuals tend to relinquish their efforts at this stage. The majority of individuals opt for mediocrity. However, this does not apply to you. It is imperative to adopt a mindset that perceives obstacles as opportunities for growth and advancement, rather than as impediments to be circumvented. It is imperative to perceive the adversity encountered as a validation of one's chosen trajectory. It is an irrefutable fact that authentic growth and development only occur in circumstances in which an individual is compelled to extend their limits and to surpass their usual level of comfort. It is evident that every champion has previously reached a point of maximum stress and strain. It is noteworthy that every winner has, at some point, been confronted with the option of abandoning their endeavor, perceiving it to be the more rational, straightforward, and secure course of action. However, the opposing team displayed greater determination and exerted more effort. Temporary exhaustion was not permitted to determine the conclusion of their narrative. The team identified a strategy that enabled them to extend their performance beyond the limits that would typically be expected. It was determined that pain would not be the ultimate arbiter. The conclusion was that the level of difficulty would not be the factor that would lead to cessation. It is imperative to transcend the internalized voice that instills the belief that a particular endeavor is futile. It is imperative to exercise wisdom and self-control, resisting the allure of succumbing to one's emotional inclinations. It is imperative to prioritize one's future aspirations over immediate comfort. It is evident that comfort will be prioritized. The pursuit of comfort may lead to the relinquishment of long-term goals in pursuit of immediate gratification. The preference for comfort over commitment is a recurrent theme that leads to a gradual disconnection from one's desired life. At any stage of a significant undertaking, there is a period in which the most straightforward course of action is to abandon the endeavor. This moment marks the pivotal juncture between aspiration and accomplishment, between those who merely dream and those who translate their aspirations into reality. It is posited that if one is able to exert themselves to a greater extent, the point at which they are most tempted to relinquish their efforts, they will be capable of surmounting any obstacle. Should the subject be capable of mustering the requisite strength to take one more step, to exert one more ounce of effort, to hold the line for one more day, a new version of themselves that is unstoppable will be discovered. The allure of resignation is pronounced. This phenomenon serves as a reminder that the investment of time in such endeavors may not yield the desired outcomes. This error message serves as an indication that the task is too challenging for the available resources. This phenomenon serves to communicate the notion that the endeavor is not worthwhile. However, the truth is the exact opposite. If the endeavor were not worthwhile, it would not demand such a significant investment. If the matter at hand was of little consequence, it would not demand such rigorous examination. The magnitude of the endeavor is indicative of the magnitude of the reward to be gained. In moments of discouragement, it is essential to take a step back and reflect on the initial motivations that led to the commencement of this endeavor. It is imperative to recall the vision that initially ignited the passion within you. It is important to recall the personal commitments that were made to oneself during the period of optimism. It is imperative to recall the future that was envisioned, and which remains a possibility if the present course is not relinquished. The inclination to relinquish one's efforts is indicative of proximity to the desired outcome, which is a common occurrence in the pursuit of personal goals. The breakthrough is characterized by the transition from exhaustion, doubt, and pain to a state of heightened awareness and potential. It is imperative to cultivate the habit of propelling oneself beyond one's customary limits. It is imperative to cultivate a mindset that propels one to persist, even in moments when the urge to succumb to exhaustion becomes overwhelming. The number of repetitions, pages, calls, and hours increases incrementally. It is precisely these additional moments that distinguish the mediocre from the exceptional. It is precisely during these additional moments that remarkable achievements are forged. It is imperative to recognize that this task will not be undertaken by another party. It is important to note that there will be no external motivation to prompt progress. It is important to recognize that external support may not be available in times of difficulty. This is the process by which one can ensure their own safety. This is the point at which an individual must draw upon their personal reserves of strength. This is the stage at which one must demonstrate to oneself the sincerity of one's aspirations. Subsequent to the process of self-validation, the concept in question becomes an inextricable facet of the individual's consciousness, thus rendering its subtraction by external entities unfeasible. Each time an individual pushes themselves beyond their perceived limits, they cultivate an invaluable inner strength. The cultivation of mental fortitude is paramount. The cultivation of emotional resilience is of paramount importance. The development of a resilient character, able to withstand pressure, is of paramount importance. The establishment of a robust foundation is imperative for the sustenance of authentic success. The individuals who emerge victorious in such endeavors are not possessed of superhuman abilities. It is evident that they demonstrated a notable degree of perseverance, continuing to participate despite their initial inclination to discontinue. It was these individuals who, undeterred by the prevailing circumstances, demonstrated a resolute determination to proceed with the endeavor. It is evident that they placed a higher value on their future prospects than on their transient emotional responses. These individuals have demonstrated a remarkable resilience, evidenced by their ability to persevere in the face of adversity without succumbing to fear. The subject has the capacity to manifest this faculty internally. The subject has been observed to demonstrate a comparable degree of strength. The aforementioned information is not concealed. It is not concealed. It is imperative to recognize that the decision to pursue this path is contingent upon the individual's readiness to confront the challenges and difficulties that may arise. It is characterized by an internal conflict, where one's inclination to succumb to rest is counterbalanced by an external compulsion to persevere. It is incumbent upon the individual to maintain a steadfast belief in the face of circumstances that might engender skepticism. It is imperative to refrain from relinquishing one's aspirations. It is imperative to refrain from relinquishing one's potential. It is imperative to persevere in the face of adversity and to refrain from abandoning the life one has assiduously crafted. It is imperative to exert more force. It is imperative to exert maximum effort, driven by a conviction that is greater than anything previously experienced. It is imperative to recognize that each step forward, irrespective of its perceived insignificance, contributes to the shaping of the individual's identity. It is important to recognize that perseverance in the face of adversity can yield positive outcomes. The decision to prioritize resilience over surrender is one that is rarely, if ever, regretted. It is important to recognize that the decision to invest in oneself, despite the expectations of others, is one that is rarely regretted. However, if one were to terminate their involvement at this juncture, one would inevitably be burdened by a perpetual sense of uncertainty regarding the potential outcomes that might have ensued had one continued to participate. The regret experienced by the individual who perceives that they were closer than they realized will be profound. It is recommended that individuals explore their potential to its maximum extent. It is imperative to embark on a journey of self-discovery to ascertain one's true capabilities. It is imperative to muster the fortitude to persevere in the face of adversity, for it is in the crucible of struggle that one forges the true essence of one's aspirations. This is the location where the phenomenon under investigation occurs. It is at this juncture that true strength is forged. It is at this nexus that futures are forged. It is imperative to exert more force. Maintain the current position. It is imperative to maintain forward momentum. It is reasonable to assume that one's future self will express gratitude for persevering in the face of challenges. Chapter 8. It is imperative to have faith in the efficacy of the process. It is an irrefutable fact that, Even in the absence of manifest results, there are periods in the course of an individual's life where a considerable amount of effort is expended, yet the fruits of that labor remain imperceptible. The subject wakes up at an early hour. You stay up late. It is evident that considerable effort is expended in pursuit of one's objectives. However, the anticipated outcomes appear to be a considerable distance away. This is the point at which the majority of individuals typically abandon their efforts. At this stage, the subject may experience a sense of uncertainty, leading them to question the efficacy of the intervention. However, it is important to acknowledge that the process of growth can occur long before any tangible results become apparent. Success is often achieved in a discreet and unassuming manner, often preceding its public recognition. Trusting one's process entails a belief in the unseen. This entails the ability to persevere in the face of initial setbacks and continue to pursue one's initial objectives. This signifies the necessity of maintaining sufficient conviction in one's capabilities to persist in nurturing seeds that have not yet germinated. The importance of maintaining consistency in the face of fluctuating progress cannot be overstated. It is challenging when there is uncertainty regarding the efficacy of one's internal processes. This is the true test. It is a common misconception that individuals' lack of success can be attributed to a deficiency in innate ability. The team's loss can be attributed to their lack of patience. The cultivation of the field was initiated with the planting of good seeds. However, the process was prematurely discontinued. The subjects commenced the experiment with considerable vigor, yet ultimately ceased prior to the attainment of the harvest. Those who emerge victorious are typically those who demonstrate unwavering commitment to the prescribed methodology. Despite the emotional turmoil experienced, the subjects demonstrated a strong conviction that their efforts were not in vain. It is imperative to have faith in the significance of one's actions, recognizing that every deed contributes to the larger context. Each exercise is designed to enhance the user's strength. Each study session is designed to enhance cognitive abilities. The act of investing a quiet morning and planning one's future can be considered analogous to the process of laying the foundations for the life one seeks to construct. While the immediate outcomes of such efforts may not always be immediately apparent, the value of the work is never diminished. The energy expended on one's personal growth is never wasted. There will be occasions when doubt will appear to predominate over belief. Occasions arise when one is beset by the conviction that the aspirations one harbors may be of an excessively ambitious nature. There are occasions when one is beset by the conviction that they are deceiving themselves. In such a context, the importance of trust becomes paramount. Trust is the cornerstone of stability in the face of emotional turbulence. Trust is the cornerstone of perseverance in the absence of tangible evidence that one's efforts are yielding results. The ability to persevere in the face of adversity is a testament to one's fortitude. Demonstrating fortitude is imperative when pursuing a dream that lacks tangible evidence of accomplishment. The capacity to maintain optimism in the face of apparent adversity is indicative of a high level of resilience. This conviction does not stem from external validation. It comes from within. This perspective is underpinned by the conviction that authentic growth occurs internally before it manifests externally. Imagine a seed underground. For a period of several weeks, there is a marked absence of observable developments. The plant requires hydration in order to survive. You nurture it. The subject is required to wait. The surface remains unaltered. However, it is evident that roots are growing underneath. The establishment of foundations is underway. The process of strengthening is occurring surreptitiously. The day the first sprout breaks the soil, while it may appear to have been a sudden occurrence, it was, in fact, the culmination of a series of events that had been developing gradually and discreetly. The same principle applies to growth. Evidence of this phenomenon may not be immediately apparent. While immediate gratification may not be apparent, consistent effort and the cultivation of conducive habits can eventually yield tangible results. Ultimately, the results of these efforts will be too substantial to conceal. One day the life to which you aspire will be before you, for you have exercised the patience to trust that which you are unable to see. It is imperative to recognize the value of one's efforts and to acknowledge that the work undertaken is not in vain. It is imperative to acknowledge the significance of each day in the pursuit of discipline. It is imperative to recognize the significance of every challenging decision made in this process. It is imperative to consistently reject distractions in order to maintain focus and efficiency. The process under discussion is contributing to the creation of something greater, even if this is not immediately apparent. It is important to note that progress does not necessarily entail a significant degree of audibility. In certain instances, progress may be characterized as unobtrusive, consistent, and gradual. Nevertheless, it is important to acknowledge the presence of this phenomenon. Trusting the process necessitates the ability to detach from the need for instant gratification. This entails the acknowledgement that optimal outcomes require temporal investment. This approach entails a profound respect for the innate biological rhythms that govern growth processes. It is not feasible to plant seeds today and then expect a harvest the following day. The construction of a masterpiece is an endeavor that cannot be achieved in a short period of time. The process of achieving greatness is not subject to expediency. The ability to work for it, to remain committed to it, and to trust that it is unfolding in its own time is of the essence. It is important to note that the subject may be tempted to cease the activity. It is acknowledged that the subject may experience a temptation to deviate from the prescribed course. It is important to note that the temptation to pursue more expeditious outcomes in other domains may arise. However, it is important to note that adopting shortcuts invariably results in increased expenditure over time. It is important to recognize that when an individual abandons a process, they are also abandoning the work that was, until that point, quietly building their strength. It is important to recognize that when one repeatedly seeks to identify faster ways of doing things, one may inadvertently lose sight of the compounding benefits that can be achieved through consistency. It is imperative to maintain composure. It is imperative to exercise patience. It is imperative to remain committed to the tasks that are within one's purview. Allow others to pursue immediate gains. Allow others to transition seamlessly between ideas. The subject displays a steadfast commitment to their methodology. The subject displays a steadfast commitment to upholding their standards. It is imperative to adhere to the vision that has been instilled in one's consciousness. The invisible seasons are where one's character is forged. The metaphorical concept of the invisible seasons in this context alludes to the process of developing one's true strength, which occurs beyond the visible realm of external validation. The invisible seasons are where the foundation is laid. Consequently, when success is achieved, it is founded upon a sustainable foundation. The existence of silent seasons is a prerequisite for the successful harvesting of crops. It is important to note that patience is not passive. Patience is a virtue. This entails the commitment to persist in one's endeavors, even in the absence of immediate recognition. The decision to maintain consistency in the face of apparent indifference from others constitutes a significant challenge. It is the wisdom to understand that unseen growth is still growth. This unobserved advancement, however, is still regarded as progress. It is evident that unseen victories are still victories. The act of attending each day constitutes a deposit into one's future financial reserves. The selection of discipline over ease is indicative of an investment in a life that will eventually demonstrate its value. It is not necessary to observe the results in the immediate future in order to have confidence in their eventual manifestation. It is not necessary to experience a sense of advancement at every juncture in order to recognize that one is engaged in the construction of a substantial undertaking. Trust in the efficacy of one's own actions is paramount. It is imperative to have faith in the habits that are being formed. It is imperative to have faith in the character that is being developed. It is imperative to have unwavering faith in the vision you are entrusted to safeguard. It is imperative to have faith that the designated time will arrive. In the absence of resignation during the silent seasons, it is the individuals who demonstrate the capacity to persist through the invisible days who ultimately prevail. It is these individuals who demonstrate unwavering commitment, maintaining their enthusiasm well beyond the initial surge of excitement. These individuals possess the capacity to persevere in the face of challenges and resist the temptation to succumb to immediate gratification, a tendency that is often exhibited by those who abandon their endeavors in such circumstances. The future is indisputably that of the patient. The rewards are reserved for the consistent individual. The victory is attributed to those who exhibited unwavering faith in their methodology, even in the face of seemingly stagnant progress. It is imperative to maintain consistent attendance. It is imperative to persevere in one's endeavors. It is imperative to maintain unwavering faith, even in the absence of immediate validation, as one's endeavors are not driven by the pursuit of transient acclaim. The objective is to effect a lasting transformation. It is imperative to maintain the current course. It is imperative to have faith in the process. The unseen labor one undertakes in the present will, in due course, forge a future of such substance and potency that the world will ultimately be unable to ignore its existence. Chapter 9. It is imperative to maintain focus on the initial objective until success is achieved. It is an irrefutable fact that when an individual embarks upon a journey towards a more significant goal, the forces of the world will invariably subject them to a process of testing and evaluation. Distractions are inevitable. It is inevitable that doubts will arise. Unanticipated impediments may emerge, necessitating strategic navigation to circumvent these challenges. Maintaining concentration is a straightforward task when circumstances are favorable. The situation is more challenging when matters become disorderly. It is imperative that one's vision should prevail over one's emotions. It is imperative to adhere to one's vision with unwavering commitment, ensuring that external influences do not divert from the initial course. It is imperative to maintain a steadfast vision, unshaken by the vicissitudes of life, to ensure resilience and fortitude in the face of adversity. The vision is the representation of the life that is being built. This is not a phenomenon that can be observed on a single occasion and subsequently disregarded. It is imperative to maintain this awareness on a daily basis. Should this subject not be given due consideration, it will inevitably be consigned to oblivion. The resultant noise is likely to be overwhelming. The demands of the world have the capacity to distract individuals from their spiritual practices. It is imperative to avoid such occurrences. It is the responsibility of the individual to ensure the protection of their vision. The ability to maintain focus on one's vision necessitates a repeated commitment to that vision. The selection of this option is often made when the individual is fatigued. The selection of this option is recommended when confronted with discouragement. The decision to opt for this option, despite the existence of seemingly more straightforward alternatives, is a testament to the commitment and dedication of the individual in question. The option of choosing it at the point of cessation is arguably more convenient. It is imperative that the vision is the primary motivation behind all decisions made. It is imperative that one's time, energy, focus, and attitude are directed towards this endeavor. It is important to note that the majority of individuals do not encounter failure as a result of their aspirations being impractical. The failure of these endeavors can be attributed to the loss of focus on their initial aspirations, which occurred as the challenges intensified. It is evident that the subjects permitted trepidation to obscure their rationality. The subjects in question permitted short-term emotions to exert a determining influence over long-term decisions. The subjects permitted external perspectives to disrupt their internal clarity. In order to achieve success, it is imperative to reject any external influences that may compromise the clarity and focus of one's internal vision. It is imperative to perceive this phenomenon with such clarity that it surpasses the perceived reality of the present moment. It is imperative to hold fast to one's convictions with unwavering resolve, undaunted by transient challenges that may arise. It is imperative to maintain a steadfast grip on this objective, undeterred by the absence of external validation. Persistence in this endeavor is paramount, as it ensures unwavering advancement towards the desired outcome. It is imperative that the vision becomes an integral component of one's identity. It is not merely a matter of discussing it when one is feeling inspired. It is a commitment that must be undertaken with unwavering dedication. This commitment is to be undertaken in the absence of any emotional response. In circumstances where motivation wanes, when the path appears arduous, and when the rewards are perceived as tardy, it is the loyalty to the vision that serves as the impetus for perseverance. The consequences of any decision made are either conducive to or detrimental to the realization of one's vision. It is important to note that there is no such thing as neutral ground. It is important to consider that every hour of time spent, every conversation entertained, every habit cultivated, and every action taken can be categorized as either a contribution to the development of one's vision or a form of distraction from it. It is incumbent upon the individual to determine which of these factors is of greater significance to them. The ability to sustain concentration necessitates a significant degree of self-discipline. This entails the act of rejecting favorable opportunities in order to pursue more optimal alternatives. It is imperative to disregard the voices that encourage one to compromise. In order to achieve this, it is necessary to reject the tendency to adopt a passive approach that may hinder progress. It is imperative to engage in daily self-reminders regarding the motivations that initially guided one's actions and the significance of the endeavor at hand. It is important to acknowledge that individuals may not always comprehend the essence of one's vision. The aforementioned parties will subject the matter to scrutiny. It is reasonable to hypothesize that this will be met with skepticism. In such cases, the insurer will endeavor to offer the policyholder more secure alternatives. It is imperative to possess the fortitude to persevere in the absence of external validation. It is imperative to possess the ability to walk alone if necessary, as if an individual's belief in their vision is contingent upon the approval of others, it will perpetually remain unattained. The construction of one's ideal existence should not be motivated by the desire for external validation in the form of acclaim. The construction of this metaphor is predicated on the notion that it represents an idealized version of the self, towards which the individual is meant to evolve. The construction of this dwelling is predicated on the premise that it represents the life to which an individual is destined to be. The motivation to build lies in the recognition that any alternative option would constitute a betrayal of one's own potential. There will be days when the discrepancy between one's current location and the desired future state appears insurmountable. It is inevitable that periods will arise in which advances will appear to be minimal or even non-existent. In such circumstances, it is of the utmost importance to adhere to the initial vision. In such moments, it becomes imperative to employ the faculty of imagination to perceive that which is not yet apparent to the senses. Attaining clarity of vision does not entail a passive approach. The system is currently operational. This is a deliberate strategy. This is a deliberate decision. This entails the daily commitment of orienting oneself towards the future one is shaping. This entails the protection of one's thoughts, conversations, and surroundings, ensuring that no external factors compromise the clarity of one's purpose. It is imperative to adopt a discerning approach in determining the content that is permitted to enter one's cognitive domain. It is important to recognize that not all voices are equally deserving of attention. It is important to recognize that not all opinions merit such a level of engagement. It is important to recognize that not all distractions are equally deserving of one's attention. It is imperative to establish an environment that serves as a daily reminder of one's identity and the direction in which one is headed. It is inevitable that setbacks will occur. It is inevitable that failures will occur. It is inevitable that there will be a certain degree of disappointment. This is an inherent aspect of the process. It is imperative to anticipate this. It is imperative to prepare for this eventuality. However, it is important to ensure that this does not result in a redefining of one's vision. It is imperative to refrain from diminishing the scope of one's aspirations in order to accommodate transient circumstances. It is imperative to resist the temptation of short-term gratification, which may lead to the forsaking of long-term aspirations. In the event of encountering difficulties, it is imperative to maintain stringent standards and not compromise them. In moments of solitude, it is essential to maintain unwavering faith in one's chosen path, regardless of the challenges that may arise. In the event of a decline in performance, it is imperative to maintain confidence in one's capabilities. The subject is to remain still and awake. It is imperative to maintain commitment to this endeavor. It is imperative to maintain concentration on the life you aspired to when you were lucid and courageous, and when you possessed a comprehensive understanding of its significance. The winners are not necessarily the individuals who encountered the fewest difficulties. It is evident that they have demonstrated an unwavering commitment to maintaining focus, undeterred by the challenges that have been presented to them. It is noteworthy that they maintain their focus on the ultimate objective, undaunted by the challenges posed by adversity. It is noteworthy that they demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity, while others were compelled to succumb to it. It is imperative to cultivate an unshakable resolve. It is imperative to attain a state of immovability. It is imperative to become completely immersed in one's vision, to the extent that no form of rejection, failure, or delay can serve as an impetus to cease endeavors. It is imperative to instill the notion that resignation is not a viable option, settlement is not a viable option. It is imperative to suspend any self-doubt. It is important to note that consistent practice of this activity will result in the gradual development of increased proficiency. Maintaining concentration on a daily basis will facilitate progress. It is evident that the subject displays unwavering commitment to their vision. Maintaining this commitment on a daily basis. The subject's actions and choices are indicative of a deliberate and conscious decision to differentiate themselves from the prevailing social milieu. It is possible that this will not be evident in the immediate future. It is possible that the aforementioned phenomenon will not be visible in the immediate future. Nevertheless, the global community will eventually observe the construction project to which you obstinately continue to dedicate your efforts. The attainment of one's desired life state is contingent upon the maintenance of unwavering concentration. The manifestation of one's aspirations is contingent upon unwavering dedication. The individual who is intended to evolve and mature is located on the other side of unwavering belief. It is imperative to resist the temptation to be influenced by transient emotions. It is imperative to refrain from being distracted by transient challenges. It is imperative to resist the temptation of transient gratifications. It is imperative to resist the temptation of transient gratifications. It is imperative to maintain composure. It is imperative to maintain an upright posture. It is imperative to persevere in the pursuit of one's goals, even when confronted with adversity. It is imperative to maintain focus on the initial objective until success is achieved. It is only once fatigue has been experienced that the aforementioned symptoms may be observed. The process will be halted once the subject has become disinterested. It is only when discomfort is experienced that the need for change becomes apparent. The attainment of a desired outcome, such as winning or entering a previously idealized lifestyle, is often characterized by a sense of anticipation and aspiration. This is the mindset required. This commitment is fundamental to the project's success. This is the price that must be paid. The financial outlay is a necessary component of the process, and as such, the individual can be assured of the value received in return. Each sacrifice made, each solitary night endured, each unseen effort exerted, each tear shed, each rejection faced, and every moment where discipline was chosen over comfort. The subject is to remain still and awake. Stay true. It is imperative to maintain resilience and persevere until victory is achieved. Chapter 10, Rise Again. In the event of an individual experiencing a fall or a sense of disorientation, it is to be expected that subsequent occurrences may result in further setbacks. The question of whether or not this will happen is now irrelevant. The only question that remains is that of time. Regardless of one's physical strength or level of preparation, there are inevitable instances when an individual encounters setbacks. There will be occasions when one's plans prove to be unsuccessful. It is inevitable that there will be periods in which all appears to be uncertain. In such moments, an individual's true strength is revealed. The true measure of success is not in the perfection of one's falls, but in the number of times one is willing to rise again. Falling is not to be regarded as a failure. The act of remaining in a state of despondency or of feeling misplaced should not be construed as a sign of weakness. Giving up on yourself is. It is evident that all champions, leaders, and individuals who have created meaningful things must learn to rise again. In the face of defeat, they were compelled to rebuild their courage as their confidence was shattered. It was imperative that they establish stability when the foundation beneath them underwent changes. The act of rising again does not entail the act of concealing the fact that one has been wounded. The concept under discussion is that of refusing to allow the pain to prevent one from moving forward. In the event of falling, the mind will present two options. One path is marked, stay down. It is imperative to take measures to ensure your own safety. Do not attempt this again. The other path, however, asserts the need to stand up. It is imperative to proceed with the investigation. It is imperative to maintain a sense of optimism and to recognize that this juncture does not necessarily represent the conclusion of one's narrative. The most straightforward course of action is invariably to relinquish all efforts. The hypothesis that the stronger path will always be to rise is one that merits further investigation. With each resurgence, an individual is presented with the opportunity to determine the nature of their existence. The choice before the individual is whether to be defined by defeat or by resilience. It is not a shame to fall. It is not a matter of shame to lose one's way. The reluctance to engage in active resistance is indicative of a societal reluctance to confront challenges. The notion that a single fall in any way diminishes one's worth is a fallacious one. Indeed, the autumnal period serves as a litmus test for one's appetite, resolve, and spirit. Each reversal functions as an inquiry, prompting introspection and self-inquiry. The extent of one's desire for this outcome is a pivotal factor in determining the effectiveness of this approach. In order to construct the life one desires, it is imperative to become accustomed to rising when one would otherwise opt to remain in bed. It is imperative to develop a tolerance for feelings of disorientation whilst maintaining an active course of action. It is imperative to develop a capacity for ongoing cognitive dissonance while maintaining forward momentum. It is important to note that clarity is not always immediate. The concept of strength is not always immediately apparent. In some cases, the development of both qualities can be achieved by maintaining persistence in the face of adversity. The individuals held in high esteem, whose triumphs are observed, have also met with defeat. There were occasions when the subject expressed a desire to disappear. There were periods when they questioned their own value. There were periods when the team's performance appeared to be without rational explanation. However, they demonstrated resilience, repeatedly rising to their feet. They maintained their trust that forward movement, however slight, would guide them back to purpose, back to strength, and ultimately to victory. It is inevitable that there will be occasions when the impact of the fall will be more acutely felt than anticipated. It is inevitable that there will be occasions when the return journey will seem to be taking a greater amount of time than was initially anticipated. It is imperative to persevere in the pursuit of one's aspirations, even in the face of adversity. The present moment is not conducive to the formulation of a new vision. It is at this juncture that one must gather oneself, cast off the accumulated dust, and recollect one's true identity. This juncture marks the opportune moment to reestablish concentration and chart a course for the subsequent stage. Even in the event of minor injury, resumption of activity does not signify that the situation is without consequence. This entails confronting the discomfort, acquiring knowledge from it, and resolutely rejecting the prospect of being overwhelmed by it. This entails acknowledging the loss while simultaneously maintaining one's own sense of identity and autonomy. This entails the process of reconstructing one's future plans, utilizing the remnants of one's former aspirations to formulate new and viable strategies. This concept signifies the conviction that the future holds value and that persevering in the present, despite the challenges it may present, is worthwhile. There will be occasions when one may feel insufficiently robust to rise. This is an acceptable outcome. The concept of strength is not synonymous with the absence of weakness. The concept of strength is predicated on the ability to act in the face of personal weakness. The ability to exercise fortitude in the face of adversity is predicated on the capacity to discern between the rational and the emotional, and to persevere in spite of the former. The concept of strength in this context is defined by the ability to demonstrate resilience in the face of adversity and to persevere in the pursuit of one's well-being. It is imperative to recognize that the path to success is not a direct one, and that periods of adversity are inevitable. The narrative is poised to be replete with unexpected plot developments, sudden reversals in plot trajectory, and unanticipated climactic events. This should not be interpreted as an indication of failure. This does not imply that the individual is inherently flawed. This phenomenon can be interpreted as a metaphor for existence itself. This phenomenon is indicative of growth and development. This signifies that the individual is undertaking the substantial task of constructing a meaningful existence. It is imperative to grant oneself permission to be human, to experience failure, to feel disorientated, and to harbor doubts. It is imperative to assign oneself the responsibility to persevere, to assimilate the lessons, to recalibrate the strategy, and to fortify one's determination. The pursuit of perfection is not an inherent aspect of the human condition. The expectation is that individuals possess a certain degree of resilience. It is imperative to adopt a relentless approach. The notion of being someone who does not succumb to the challenges of life is a fundamental principle. The act of rising after falling is a symbolic gesture that conveys a message to the world. The speaker asserts that they have not yet completed their task. The present study is not yet complete. The conclusion is drawn that the subject is not beyond redemption. I am still standing. The present study is still in progress. I am still believing. The message is sent to oneself that one is trustworthy, that one can be relied upon in times of need, and that no matter how challenging the circumstances, one's future will not be forsaken. One's identity is not determined by their failures. You are defined by your rise. The individual's character is defined by the fortitude demonstrated in their ability to persevere and to stand back up again in the face of adversity. The decision to persist in the face of adversity, when abandoning the endeavor would be more straightforward, is a defining moment that shapes one's identity. The ability to transform adversity into opportunity, to interpret setbacks as catalysts for advancement, and to convert losses into catalysts for leadership is the defining characteristic of the individual who is able to overcome challenges. With each ascent, an individual not only achieves their goals, but also establishes a foundation for future growth and development. You build your soul. The process of developing resilience involves the cultivation of a fortitude that will enable one to persevere in the face of future challenges. The construction of an inner fire impervious to the winds of disappointment is paramount. The establishment of a positive reputation, one which conveys the notion of resilience and the ability to overcome adversity, is of paramount importance. This reputation is founded on the principle that, irrespective of external circumstances, the individual possesses the capacity to navigate their way back from any situation. It is not necessary to possess all the answers in order to experience a resurgence of growth. It is not necessary for the plan to be perfect. It is imperative to recognize that the narrative is not yet complete. It is imperative to cultivate the belief that, provided one continues to draw breath, there is always an alternative course of action available. It is evident that an additional element is present. This marks the conclusion of the present chapter. It is imperative to recognize that another victory is yet to be secured. There will be occasions when one rises quietly. The absence of a celebration and an audience was notable. The focus remains exclusively on the individual, their determination, and their conviction that their life continues to hold significance. It is these rises that are of the greatest significance. It is precisely these challenges that have the capacity to metamorphose an individual, rendering them unstoppable. It is possible to overcome any adversity should the individual choose to do so. It is posited that progressing through adversity is the most effective method of overcoming confusion. In the face of adversity, it is imperative to persevere and fortify oneself, ensuring resilience in the face of challenges. In the event of refusal to remain in a state of disrepair, the pursuit of one's aspirations remains a possibility. The prospect of a future that is both possible and beneficial is, however, still open to consideration. The subject's strength continues to increase. Rise again, rise tired, rise scared. The rise is unclear, rise bruised, rise confused. But rise betrayed. This is due to the fact that every ascent represents a triumph. Each ascent represents a progression towards the life that one is capable of living. Each ascent serves as a testament to one's resilience and the enduring spirit that propels forward progress. It is imperative to recognize that the struggle persists, the act of writing is ongoing, and the story continues to be crafted. The process of self-actualization is ongoing, and the individual is continually evolving in accordance with their inherent potential. It is evident that the world has yet to witness the pinnacle of one's potential rise again.